Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IPDay's series of webinars, and you are participating in the Math DefragGED Calculator Tips and Tricks webinar. First of all, I'd like to thank you for spending precious time within your day to participate in this webinar. Hopefully, you'll be able to gain some useful ideas and information that you can use to help your students pass and improve on their GED Mathematics Modules test. This webinar is part of a series of Math DefragGED webinars that will help you prepare your students for the GED test. For this one particular webinar, we will focus on the effective use of the calculator. We all know how critical it is for the students to be proficient in the calculator. One of the things that they need to know is that the calculator, the more they know about their calculator, is the more time they save taking that test that they can spend on more difficult and more complex problems. So really the calculator skills are very important that we practice with our students. In this webinar, we're also going to focus on standards that focus on the most missed questions. So you will notice that the problems we're going to be doing in this webinar would focus mostly on those types. Specifically, in this one, we're going to do a lot of things in circles and cylinders. This webinar will also show you some tips and tricks on how to use the TI-30 calculators. Give you some ideas on how your students can save time using the calculators, and give you some ideas on certain activities that you can do with your students. And also at the same time, we will model to you how to use the different functions of your calculator. So without further ado, we're going to get started with our webinar. And again, thank you for your participation. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ron Cruz. I'm an administrative coordinator of the refugee program in Hillsborough County Public Schools Adult Education. And I also have other experiences in the field of education, such as peer evaluation, department head, mathematics teacher, also a district trainer, a mentor for beginning teachers, a supervising teacher for interns, and also a robotics coach. Also helping me with this webinar is Lynn Ralston. She's also in Hillsborough County Adult Education. She will be in charge of answering your questions. So don't think that I'm like Superman. I can answer all your questions at the same time. Lynn is working in the background, so keep those questions coming if you have any particular question that you want to ask or any suggestion. We welcome all those ideas, and we would like to share them to everyone who's participating in this webinar. All right, let's start off with getting to know just the orientation, how the things are oriented in our calculator. If you look at how your calculator is organized, and I really do suggest you have a calculator in front of you in this particular webinar, so that you can follow us through as I go over some of the basic tips and tricks, and then the buttons and the functions as well. And if you do not have a calculator in front of you, do not worry, because we have this webinar recorded. So within 24 hours of this broadcast, we will be posting this webinar in the IPDay website so that you can go through it, review it again, or even use some ideas here and show them to your students. So going back to what I'm talking about, if you look at your calculator, it's organized in a very specific manner. If you look here in the left side of your calculator, your logarithmic functions are clumped together on the left side. Whereas your power functions, buttons that raise a number or a value or a variable to a specific power, are also clumped together on the left side. Your trigonometric functions are all together right in the middle, although trigonometry is not within the scope of the GED mathematics module. I just want to give it to you as an additional information. Your basic operations are grouped together, and they're also color-coded. And also, the inverse function is right there. So you got your major functions here that, you know, students normally learn when they get into Algebra 2. Also, if you press the second function, this green button over here at the top left corner, you will get to another array of functions that we study. We have the exponential functions. So the exponential functions are the same buttons that you use for the logarithmic function. So whenever you press your second button, it automatically reverses the operations within these two buttons into exponential. The top one is 10 to the x, and the bottom one is e to the x. We're not going to use a lot of these in the GED test. This is just for informational purpose. You also have your hyperbolic function right here where the pi is. So when you press your second function and you press pi, you will access the hyperbolic functions of your trigonometric functions. And then this one, radical functions, is the one we use most frequently also, especially in this 2014 module of GED. You're going to use a lot of these radical functions, which is in the second function of x squared and then this caret button over here. You also have your percent operations right here. Mostly they are in order for you to put the percent sign or in order for you to convert it to something with a percent sign. All right, now we go to some special buttons. I call these special buttons because they're not a function, they don't belong to anything, they don't necessarily control the settings of your calculator. So we're just going to go through it one at a time. Starting off with the upper left corner, the quit button. That you press that whenever you want to quit out of any menu. So let's say you click on the probability menu or the data menu or the table menu. Those three buttons right here, you can get out of those menus by pressing the second function, the green button, and then the mode to get out of it. We already talked about the second function. We have a button that strictly accesses the value of pi. Just keep in mind that this pi is not in your, if you are in the mode of the math print mode, this will automatically print the symbol for pi and not the approximated value of pi. We also have the variable buttons right here. You'll see over here that there's so many letters in here. There's X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Those are all empty cells where you insert or store values. So we'll talk about that in greater detail later on. We also have the store and recall button on the lower left, almost to the lower left corner of your calculator. That's when you can store and re-access values that you store in your calculator. Delete and insert. I know some people are getting confused with these two buttons. We're going to go over that. This delete button right here is very useful where you're only clearing a portion of an entry in your calculator. Do not confuse this with the all clear or the clear button. This clears the entire line. And if you press this clear button twice, it clears the entire screen. So just be careful with the use of the with the use of the clear button. I always suggest my students to use the delete button. These four buttons right here, up, down, left, right, they look like a joystick, PlayStation 2 or a Xbox joysticks. Right here is your scroll buttons. So this is how you can move the cursor to different areas in your calculator screen so that you can insert, delete, or modify certain portions of your entries. We also have the fraction button here, very convenient and accessible. Remember that this button is only useful when you are in the math print mode. This will help us, if you look at here on the screen right here, it allows us to enter numbers and print it out in numerator-denominator format. And then lastly, we have the toggle button. The toggle button allows you to convert between fraction to decimal or something with the radical symbol to its approximated value. So this toggle button is your friend. You always use this, especially when you're dealing with multiple choice type questions. Oh, okay. So now we're going to start off with a word problem. Okay, so you might want to pull out a small sheet of paper or something to write on and a writing instrument. Let's try this problem out and see what we're going to get. And I'm going to model how to use the calculator in solving this particular problem. So let me read it to you. In an excavation site, there were 2 circular areas to be excavated. One has a radius of 2 meters, while the other has a radius of 4.5 meters. How much gravel has to be removed from each hole in order to reach a depth of 8 meters? So let's try this problem out. Okay. So I'm gonna go to our I'm gonna pull up the calculator on the right side, and then we're gonna try this problem out together. And if you know how to work this problem out, by all means, go ahead and do that. And then we're just going to be able to verify our answer. So one way that I tell the students is just illustrate the problem. So you got 2 holes. One is 2 meters in radius, and the other one is 4.5 meters in radius. Initially, your students won't be able to immediately capture what type of, what operation, what information do we need, because unless they draw it, they're now going to start to visualize, oh, so if we're digging through these 2 holes, we're forming somewhat of a figure. Okay, and then this depth has to be 8 meters. So then let's cap it off at 8 meters. Let's just pretend that's 8 meters. I did not draw that to scale. And just so you know, this is not the only way to solve this problem. There's other ways you can do this problem. You can go straight into the formula and plug it in if you can visualize right away. I just suggest, especially for my struggling students, the best way to deal with this problem is to draw it. So looking at this, now I can clearly see we're dealing with a cylinder. Okay, so now we're trying to get all of the gravel, all of the soil and dirt out of here. So if you're talking about everything that's in here, we're looking at volume. So let's look at our calculator formula sheet, and let's look at this particular and see if we have that. So if you look over here, you have cylinder, and then the challenge is for you to determine whether are you using surface area or the volume. For my students, they're always a little bit confused with that. But now we already identified that we're looking at the volume, so we're going to use this formula right here, pi r squared h. So it's also good to explain what the r and the h stands for in our situation. So for our particular situation, the r represents the radius of the holes, and then the h represents the height or the depth of the digging that we have to do. All right, so let's go back. So I'm going to write the volume formula, pi radius squared times the height. Sometimes I would ask the students, okay, go ahead and point out where your r is and where your h is, so you know what values go in each one. So we're going to start off with the hole with a smaller radius. So let's solve that for a minute. Let's set up the equation. Pi times the radius squared, which is 2, squared, times the height of 8. Okay. All right, times the height of 8. All right, so let's enter that in the calculator real quick. Okay, so first thing that we're going to have to do is to access the pi button right there. everything I enter in the calculator, everything I press goes in red, or the last button I press is in red. And then you'll also see it on the right-hand side of this calculator screen, what buttons I'm pressing, so you can follow through if you're running a little behind. Okay, you can immediately enter the radius of 2 and square it. So there's a shortcut for squaring, and that's the x squared button that I just pressed. Okay, and then we're going to multiply it by 8. So some people like doing this. Okay, you will get 32 pi. Some people like doing this, and I think it's good practice. Oh, sorry about that. Some people like doing this, pi, and then some people like they put the 2 in parentheses, and that's still good practice. And then you can put in the 8 also in parentheses. If you teach this way of entering in the calculator to your students, I know it takes a little bit more, just a tad bit more time to enter, but it helps them in the proper use of the grouping symbols when they get into the more complicated combinations of volumes and combinations of areas, so they know where to put certain numbers. And you press enter, you still are going to get the 32 pi. And I also wanted to show you that if you press 2 squared and then the pi and then just the 8 without the multiplication sign, it will still give you the same answer. So in this case, it's treating the 2 squared as one complete quantity. And then they're multiplying that 2 squared by the 8 and by the pi. And keep in mind that the calculator is doing this from left to right. They're doing the order operation. So they're doing the powers first, and then multiplying it from left to right. Okay, so now we see 32 pi right here. What if the 32 pi is not in the drop-down, or not in the choices, or not in the hotspot choices? So then that's when you use your toggle button. If you wanted the estimated value of 32 pi, you just press the toggle button, and it automatically provides you with the decimal approximation of that. So I'm going to go ahead and just write either 32 pi over here, and then I'm going to write the approximate symbol, and then I can put 100.53. I'm just going to go ahead and round it to the hundredths place. Okay, so let's now go to our second hole. We have 4.5 meters in radius over here. So we're going to use the same formula, V. And then the volume for this one is the same, pi times the radius of 4.5 squared times the height of 8. Okay, so let's do that with our calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen of my calculator, and I'm going to also clear the press history. And if I'm going too fast, go ahead and type into the question bar. Let us know that I'm going too fast so I can slow down a little bit for some of you. Okay, so again, we're going to follow the same string, whichever way you want it. You can press pi, and then 4.5, and then you square it. And then you can immediately enter 8. That's the least number of press buttons or keystrokes that you can do and get an answer. Oh, wait a minute. In here, if you notice, the pi is no longer there in the answer compared to our answer before, which gave us 32 pi initially, and then we still had to press the toggle button to come up with 100.53 and so forth. In this case, just because we have the 4.5, every time you enter a decimal and you multiply it by pi, it will no longer display the pi. It will no longer be in exact format. I don't know, that's just how the calculator is. So in this case, we're just going to write this value right here, the approximate value. Let me erase that. They're going to write the approximate value in this case is 508.5 94 if we round it to the hundredths place. Now, what if everything is in exact form? How do I handle that situation? If you want the pi there in your answer, just as you have in here, what you're going to have to do is you're just going to have to separate the pi from your equation. So let's clear this. I don't have to clear it, so I can just hit 4.5. You square it, and then you can just press 8 or times 8, and then you're going to get 162, and then you can go ahead and just write 162 pi if you want the exact value. Let me clarify that that's a 2. All right. So far, we have solved this particular problem. We're able to find out how much gravel or how much dirt, a volume of material we have to take out of these two holes. So for the first hole, we're going to take out 100.53, okay, cubic meters. And then in here, we're going to take out approximately 508 cubic meters. Yes, and you would notice as well that the given answer in the handout is automatically rounded to 509. That was just raised by one of our participants. Thank you so much for pointing that out. All right, let's go back to our presentation. Okay. Okay, I talked to you about, some people, and actually some students are really getting confused and getting frustrated whenever they clear out the entire thing. Oh, and I just entered the whole thing and I pressed the wrong button and it deleted everything that I had in there. It's important that you go over the differences between these three functions. The clear button, the delete button, and the insert button. They're very similar to each other, but they're not the same. And if you use them inappropriately, you're going to get frustrated. So you wanted to show the differences between these three to your students. So let me illustrate that to you with what we have so far. So let's go back to our calculator screen. Okay, so if you're going back to the calculator screen, let's say you made an error right here. You wanted to enter 4.6 rather than 4.5. Okay, how do you do that? Well, you can re-enter the whole equation with the correct one. You can re-enter pi times 4.5 squared times 8, or you can scroll to it. Okay? And if you press, now that I press enter, I can now edit whatever it is here. So I'm just scrolling through, and I'm going to replace that 5 with a 6. Now, I can enter right here, but just to be sure, I'm going to exit away out of that, and then I'm going to press enter. And then now I have the new modified one. What I did was just, I went to, let me repeat that. I went to and scrolled to the area where I wanted to change, and then once it's highlighted, I put in the new value that I want to enter. So let's just repeat that for you real quick so that we know the steps and how to do that. So let's say I wanted to change this now to 4.9. I'm just going to scroll through until I'm on that line, and it highlights the entire equation. I don't want to edit this whole thing. I'm going to just press enter, and the calculator will automatically copy that whole line onto the last line and to a new line. And then you can scroll through the area that you wanted to change until it's the one that it's being highlighted. So right now it's the 6, and I want to change it to a 9, and it automatically replaced the 6 with a 9, and I exit out of it. You can enter in the middle of it. It's the same thing. It doesn't make a difference. And now it's changed. Now, what if I wanted to delete the 0.9? Okay, so I'm just going to go and scroll up there, press enter again, and then I just want to delete the 0.9. I just wanted to get 4 squared. That's when you use the delete button. Delete. And then when you press the scroll over and then delete again. So I deleted the entire 0.9 section, the decimal section, and then now I can press enter. So look, right after I removed the decimal digits and the decimal point, it automatically reverted back to the exact value. Okay, so just so you know, that's how your calculator is going to behave when you're dealing with the pi symbol. All right, so let's do the clear button. What the clear button does is it clears the last entry or the last line. So you press this once, and it clears the entire screen. So I mean, if you scroll up, it will only scroll up to the second to the last line that we entered, the 128 pi. So whenever you press clear button, it will delete only the last line. Okay, and then if your screen goes blank, don't think that everything was deleted. You can always scroll up to find out where the other ones are. So your calculator stores as much information as its memory can hold. So look at here, I kept on scrolling up, and it's storing everything that I've done so far since the beginning of this webinar. Everything that I have not cleared or modified. So that's something that your students need to know as well. They don't have to re-enter something. Sometimes if they've done an operation or a formula multiple times and they remember they did it, they can just scroll up to the formula and change the value, especially if they're just computing volumes of cylinders for the entire time. Now, if I want to delete everything and I want to start clean, that's when you clear the button twice. Oh, wait a minute. That's not. I'm in the middle of something, so let me just scroll all the way to the bottom. Okay. So if you clear it twice, you can, oh, it's still showing up. Okay, you can clear that really quickly by doing the reset. So let me show you that real quick. So if you want to clear everything to the top, you can just do the reset second, and then reset. Then you can do the number 2, the second choice. So you can press 2, and then it clears everything. So everything now, even if I press scroll up, it's no longer showing any entries there. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, so we got those. I got the clear, I got the delete, and I already showed you how to insert. Using the insert key, I don't think that you need to know that because I already showed you a quicker way to insert by scrolling. So I don't want to go over this anymore, but the insert button does the same thing. The insert, if you press the second and the insert button, you're also going to be able to write over a specific section of your calculator or a specific entry in the screen of your calculator. Okay, this is another thing that's good to know. The TI calculator, 30XS calculator, it will automatically store your last answer. And you're always going to be able to recall that every time. So let me show you how that's done. Okay. Remember, oh no, we cleared our answer already, so we're not going to be able to recall what we did, but let me just enter this again. Let's enter the pi 2 squared. Pi times 2 squared times 8. You enter that, you get 32 pi, and let's just do the second one as well. Pi times 4.5, and then you square that times the 8, enter that, and gives you an approximate value. Okay, let's just say I wanted to use the 32 pi value and enter it, let's say, times the price of digging up dirt. If you want to reuse that 32 pi and multiply it by the price per cubic meter of dirt that you remove from the hole, if you're a contractor, then you can easily pull that up. Pull that up. So if you press second and then answer, oh no, this one will pull out the 508, by the way. It's not going to pull up the 32 pi. And then we can multiply it, let's just say, by, let's say, $15. And then now you're able to. So see, what it did was take the 508, which was your answer from previously, and instead of entering all of these digits into the calculator again and multiplying it by 15, you can recall that answer and multiply it by 15. Actually, we can do that. Let's do that again, and there's a faster way to do that. You press pi, and then let's re-enter the 4.5 times 8. 4.5 squared times 8. Okay, now if I press my multiplication button, it does the same thing. So immediately the reverting to a new operation takes your last answer and immediately inserts it into your next line. And so now I've got the same value. So 7,634 and then some decimals. That's the same value as we've got up here. All right? Okay. Just so you know, we're going to go over a lot, but I'm not going to be able to go over every single detail in the use of your calculator. This would require us to do a 2, 3, 4 hour. This would easily be a 4-hour webinar. And I'm just going to go over certain things, but what we're going to do is we're going to release more webinars into and broadcast them to you so that you can get the other functions that we're not able to cover in this one. All right, let's do a store and recall values. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to store certain values and recall them at a certain time. Okay, so let's go back to our calculator. Just so you know, these are the two symbols or buttons that we're going to be playing around with. I'm not going to clear my screen because I am actually going to want to use this. I'm going to use the 32 that I'm talking about earlier, the 32 pi. I want to use this one. Okay? So I'm going to scroll to this line and press enter. So now I have my 32 pi again right here. Okay, let's say I want to store that because I want to use that later. So I'm going to press store. And then there's a little arrow that populated. So now, after you press the store, you're going to have to now pick where you want to store that, and that's where you press this button right here that has a bunch of letters: X, Y, Z, A, B, C. So let's press that real quick. Okay, so what this means is we're going to store 32 pi, whatever that value is, into the value of X. Into the variable X. Well, what if I don't want to use X? Okay, well, I don't. you can press this consecutively. See how it's changing? It doesn't have to do, it doesn't affect the operation. So you can use whatever variable you wanted to store it to. It doesn't matter. So this, for this case, let me say I want to store it to X, because that's the easiest one. That's the one that pops up immediately. So when I press enter, nothing happens. What it does is, after this, and it shows 32 pi right here on the right side, it tells you that it has been stored into the X. We're going to pull that up later. Okay, let's just say, okay, I did a new operation, 1 plus 2. Let's just do that, one random operation, 3. And then what I want is I want to multiply this 3 into the value of the X. Okay, so I want to use this 32 pi and multiply it by 3. Now we have to recall a specific value. So what you can do is you can press enter. You can press the number 3, I'm sorry. And then you can press the variable symbol. And then if you select X, what this will do is multiply 3 with whatever value you stored in your X variable, which earlier was 32 pi. So let's try and see if that's going to happen. See? So what it did was to multiply 32 by 3, which is 96, and then it kept the pi symbol with it. All right? So that's how you store and recall variables. Just so you know, you have to remind your students that those values are going to remain stored there until you replace it with a new value or you clear your memory. So just keep in mind, when your students become very savvy in storing and recalling values, that they need to remember to reset the calculator if they want a new value or they want to assign it to a new value or change it. It's not always going to be that number. I mean, it's going to be what was stored in there previously. That's why it's best practice when students are borrowing calculators from each other and they want to use it independently, that they clear the memory first. And I already showed you how to do that. All you got to do is press second and then the 0 or the reset button right here. And then it will ask you, do you want to reset? Yes or no. You press 2 for it to be reset. So let's clear the history and let's clear the screen right now so we can go back to our presentation. So we went over those store and recall values. Okay, so now we're going to go to certain buttons, which is called your settings buttons. Your settings buttons are your buttons that give you a control over your calculator. Okay, so the mode button will control the mode of your calculator. It will allow you to change how the numbers are displayed, how the decimals are rounded, if you're working with angles, and it will let you do all of those things. The power button turns it on and off, of course. In here you also have your contrast buttons. If you press your second function right here and you press plus or minus, it brightens or dims your calculator. So I'm going to show that to you. I don't know if the computer version would do that, but we're going to give it a try when we switch to the calculator. So this one will reset the contrast of your calculator, depending if the room is dark or the room that they're testing in is too bright, you can't see anything from the calculator. That's when you change these settings. And then you also have your table settings. This one will ask you, when you're creating a table, do you want it to skip count by 1? How many do you, that type of thing. It will allow you to do that. And then also in here you have your reset button. So let's look at the contrast button while we're on the screen. I wanted to show you that real quick. Oh, sorry. There you go. I want to show you that contrast button real quick, and let's see if this works on this one. So let's type in some numbers just so for the sake of entering something. And I haven't tried this yet, but I don't know if my computer calculator would do the dim. No, it's not. It's not changing. But have you, if you have the handheld calculator with you, you can try dimming and increasing the contrast of your calculator and see if it works. Some of your students will come to class and say, well, teacher, my calculator doesn't work. Every time I press something, there's nothing that's showing up on the screen. The first thing that you check is make sure that this area right here where you have the charging solar panel, that's not blocked. If they're blocking that, it will automatically turn off the calculator if it doesn't have any more power in it. And then the second thing you need to check is whether the dims are set in a different setting. Okay, so that's one thing I learned today, is that it won't do it on the computer screen calculator. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, again, I already went over this. Remember to reset the calculator every time you use a new calculator and start fresh, especially when you're using these GED calculators that are loaned by each GED testing center. Check the mode to see if it's at default. So this is the default in the screen. This should be the settings that you have in your calculator. The degree has to be highlighted. Normal, it has to be highlighted. Floating has to be highlighted, and math print has to be highlighted. And I'm going to talk about what these all meant, what these things mean. And then I told you about the display screen. If it's still showing blank, check the display contrast. Okay, so let's go to that menu screen real quick. All right, so let's clear this out and clear this. And let's go to mode. So DEG means degree. Rad means radians, and grad is gradients. And we're not going to use these two areas right here. That's why you don't want your students, because the GED test will not have radians. We won't ask you to convert between the different measurements of the angles. This one, the next line, talks about normal, scientific, and engineering. Scientific automatically puts it in the format of one number, a whole number before the decimal, and followed by times 10 to a certain number integer. And then the engineering setting is always set at a format of times 10 raised to a power of 3 or its multiple. So it's all a multiple of 3. When you go to float, this floating point area right here will give you automatically round up to the last digit that the calculator can show on the screen. But if you want it to automatically round to a specific decimal point, then you can just scroll here and then pick the number of decimal digits you want after. So let's show that. Let's do 3 decimal digits. And then I'm just going to press enter there. So that's that. And then let me quit here. And let's do some division problems. So let's do 9 divided by 5. See how it shows here? It's 1.8, but it didn't stop at 8. It shows you 2 other decimal digits over here just because we changed that floating point digit. So I want to put it back there to its original setting. And every time you reset your calculator, it automatically puts it in these default settings. So I'm going to press enter there so that the float now is the one that's highlighted, and let me quit out of here. All right, so let's clear that. Okay, I already went over these things with you. Just this slide is just for your reference. That what we just went over. Okay, so we're gonna do these other buttons right here. 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons. All have a conversion capability. Okay, so if you press the second function and then this, it will convert it between improper and mixed. And then here we'll convert it between fractions and decimals. This one will convert it to a percent. And this one will convert it to whatever. You know, you can keep pressing the toggle button to convert it into different formats. It will not convert to percent. That's the only thing. And I don't think it will convert to a mixed number as well. So it just reverts back to exact or approximate, fraction, or decimal. Okay, so let me show you how to do that real quick. All right, in here, let's say, oh, you know what? Let's practice the ones that we have on the slide, the next slide. Let's try out these following things. All right, and I think I have one more. All right. So I'm going to show you how to convert all of that. Okay. Well, let's start off with this. Convert 3/5 to a decimal. So hopefully you already know how to enter into a fraction. So you can immediately press the numerator, 3, and then you press ND, it automatically puts it in the numerator spot, and then 5, 3/5. From here, you can immediately change this to a decimal by pressing second and table. You see that FD that display, that means fraction to decimal. Whenever you press enter, it automatically converts it to that number. And if you already know how to do these things, just to practice the conversions real quick, convert 0.41 to percent. That's pretty easy. Let me delete what I just accidentally pressed that. 0.41, and you want to change it to percent. That's when you press this little area right here. You press second and the close parentheses, and it will automatically, oh, I entered 14. So I'm going to change it to 41. So I hover over it, I change that, and then I change that to a 1, and I scroll over. So see, I just showed you again how to change and insert, and then that converts it to 41%. 9/7, we're going to convert this to a mixed number. So let's do that again. 9, you press the ND button, it puts it in the numerator. And then 7, you can go over. And then you can press second and the same, this one right here, the 10 times 10 to the n. See, that's a common fraction converted to a mixed number. Okay, so let's enter that. So that's 1 2/7. All right, and then this time let's do it in reverse. So when you're entering into a mixed number, when you're trying to enter a mixed number, you can automatically go ahead and enter the whole number first. That's 7. And then you're going to press second and D. See, it puts the 7 in the whole number spot, and then you can put in your 5/8. And now we want to convert this. We're going to press the same button right here, second times 10 to the n. Even though this is not a proper fraction or an improper fraction, this is both ways. So it will automatically detect what type of fraction is it, and it generates the opposite. So if you got a mixed number, then it will put it on improper fraction format. Okay. So let's do convert 62% to a decimal. So let's enter a percent. So you can easily do that by pressing the number. And then this is your percent symbol right here. So second, open parentheses. And then if you want to convert it to a decimal, there's no direct conversion there, but if you press the enter, it will automatically convert it to a decimal. Okay, because the calculator is by default displaying and evaluating everything in decimal format, unless you have the symbols pi, radical, and then the radical symbol. And then lastly, we're going to find the approximate value of square root of 8. So I haven't showed you radicals yet, so let's do the radical. In order to enter something under the square root, you're going to press second and then this button right here, x squared, and then radical 8. You can enter right away. Oh, this is not what I want. This gives you the exact value, okay, in radical form. So what your calculator just did was to simplify radical 8 or square root of 8 into 2 radical 2. That not necessarily help us with this particular task. We want to approximate. That's again, like I said, you can use your toggle button to immediately convert that to a decimal. Okay. Okay, so there's other buttons that what you call there are menu buttons. So menu buttons is when you press them, you have several choices to select from. So these are your angle and your probability menus, your statistical menu. We're probably going to cover these when we go to our next calculator tips and tricks webinar, because there's a lot of things you can do with the data button, and then also your table menu. Okay. So right now I'm going to pause for a second and give you some time to ask some questions. Lynn Ralston is standing by for any of your questions or comments that you may have so far. In the midway between our webinar. One of the things you wonder is like, why did you go over so lengthy? You went over so much in the conversion process. Because that's so much important, because sometimes you cannot predict what types of choices in the multiple choice you're going to have. And students have to be proficient between different formats, fractions, decimals, percents, because GED would usually, on the GED test, it would usually show you or just give you a format that is most appropriate for the situation that you're solving for, So there's just taking, for example, cooking and things like that. All right. And then, so if you're dealing with cooking, you're probably going to get more likely fractional choices. And if you're computing in decimals, then that's going to be, you're going to need to convert between the two. All right. Some people are asking for a little bit more difficult GED type questions. We will get to that in a minute. So we're going to go through the probability menu this time. There's 3 options on your probability menu. We call the NPR, which is short for your permutation formula. This is what you have to keep in mind is that when you're using the permutation, when you're selecting in a situation, the order of where objects are selected is very important. When you are in the combination mode, that means the order on how you select objects in that situation doesn't really matter. And then you also have the factorial. Selection of all objects in the collection where the order is important as well. All right, so let's look at, we have a couple of problems in this one, and I wanted to really go over this very quickly with you. So first, the first thing that you need to know is that you need to determine whether the situation calls for a permutation or a combination. First, if you look at here, in designing your own backsplash, how many ways can you arrange 6 different color tiles on a strip? In here, you have different colors. You got the dark brown, and this one is a light, a gray, I think this is tan color, and then you have an even darker shade of brown, a shiny color here, that type of thing. So if you're arranging six different colors in a strip where there's 6 on a strip on a tile, and you're trying to find out how many ways can you rearrange those tiles, then therefore the order of how you arrange them is very important. So we know that this is a permutation. So let's do that in a calculator and solve that real quick. Clear that and then clear the key. So if you do that, now first you kind of need to know how many objects are there in my selection. And right now I have, in the problem I have 6. Okay, and then I press the probability menu. And in here, do I pick 1, 2, or 3? So you can press 1, or you can press enter if you're already highlighting the 1. And then it will give you the NPR permutation. And then you can press 6. And it will give you, and if you press enter, you have 720 ways on how you can rearrange those 6 different colors on a strip of backsplashing. So again, the key here is to keep in mind that to know whether it's a permutation or a combination. So let's look at the second problem real quick. In here, Luis has an empty plant box that can hold 3 plants, so he went to Homes R Us to purchase the plants. The store has 7 varieties of plants to choose from. How many select 3 different plants to put in the empty plant box? So in this case, do you think it is important whether which plant he selects first, and then when he checks out at the counter, it really doesn't matter. So the order in this case is not so much important, okay? He's just purchasing them from the store, Homes R Us. So in here, this is going to be a combination type of problem. So let me do that real quick. So in here, you have 7 varieties of small plants, so you're going to press 7. And in this time, you're going to go again to your probability menu. And then you're going to go and scroll to the second one, where you have number 2 right now, which is your combination. And then you press on how many is he selecting out of the 7. He's selecting 3 different ones. So I'm going to put 3 right here. And you press enter. And there's only 35 ways. Okay, there's only 35 ways that he can select. Notice that every time you do a combination and a permutation, there's always going to be less if you do it the same way on a combination, because the order is not so much important. So you're taking out every duplicate. All right. I already showed you the scrolling technique when I tried to delete or modify something in the middle of an equation or something, or in the middle of an entry or something that I've entered before. So I'm not going to go over that anymore. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go over the constant K feature. And what we're going to do is when we do our second round of the calculator webinar series, we're going to focus a little bit more on constant K. For just informational purposes, constant K is no different than your storing on a variable. But the constant K allows you to store operations or a string of operations. So if you wanted to store a whole formula, then the constant K would be the best feature of your calculator that you wanted to do. Unfortunately, we are running out of time on that. We're not going to be able to go over the constant K feature. If you download the handout materials, it will show you how that is done. It's still part of the handouts. I just didn't I didn't foresee that we're going to take so much time going over these other features. But we have created a handout for you that you can download, and also, just so you know, you can always re-access this webinar through our IPDAY website. IPDAY website, and if you go to just the GED AHS section of the screen, click on it, and you click on the webinar portion, then you're going to be able to access, and all of our Math DefragGED series webinars are going to be stored in that folder. Please take some time. I know that you are spending a good amount of time going over this webinar. We do wanted to improve. This is our first ever series on the calculator use, and I know you have some really good feedback that you can give us, please take some time, go over to surveymonkey.com and go to this link right here, and you please try to complete our webinar survey. If you have your smartphone with you, you can easily scan also this barcode, and you can also wait until the rebroadcast, or when we save this into the file. You can always pull up this this QR code for you to access our SurveyMonkey. Your feedback is very important to us. What you wanted to know and what you want to learn about, we want to talk about that, and we want to provide you that help. Hopefully, we were able to provide you with some very useful tips and tricks in the use of the calculator. And just so you know, this is not the last one we're ever going to do on the series calculator. We're always listening to the field and to the teachers, whatever they need. And as we do our face-to-face workshops, we also talk to teachers about what certain things are they struggling with, especially with the use of the technology. The IPDAY, Team IPDAY would like to thank you again so much for participating and spending your afternoon with us. Hopefully you were able to learn a lot from us, and we do really value your time and your feedback. Just for your reference, I am posting now the references to the website. Thank you so much, and you all have a great afternoon.